Now, let's dig in a little bit more in hypocrisy. We're question 111 in the Summa, the second part of the second part. Have a look at previous videos to see how this all fits in with the larger context of the Summa. Okay, previous video I talked about truth, and this is sort of a mini treatise on truth, basically truth as a virtue and the associated vices, or the vices that are against truth. And we saw in the previous one that like included, lying and dissimulation and hypocrisy. Those are vices. Boasting is a vice, and so is irony. Irony is a vice too. All right, so I looked at truth, and remember, truth for Aquinas is, in this context, not in every context, it's not just a property of belief, but it is a property of your will, and it's your propensity, your habit, the skill of always telling the truth, and not just telling the truth in general, because sometimes, as we say, I don't know, when people sometimes say the truth hurts or whatever, well, you got to be careful about that, because sometimes it can be very inappropriate and damaging, even immoral, to state a truth, right? So the notion of truth as a virtue will be in line with the general ideas of virtue ethics, which means not just saying something that is true, but in the right circumstances. So it involves some judgment. Okay, go to the previous video if you need a little bit of refresher on that. So question 110, our big topic question, is lying, and then question 111 we get to dissimulation and hypocrisy. Lying is a vice. It's a vice against truth. Aquinas' discussion is, as usual, very fascinating, as usual, deeply rooted in previous thinkers, and of course the philosopher, who is Aristotle. And lying, to unpack everything Aquinas says about it, it involves Aristotle's fourfold causation. I am not going into that here. It's a good read, a fascinating read, but I'd have to do a bunch of stuff on Aristotle to bring up what Aquinas is really after. So at the risk of being simplistic, or at least, but still, I think getting what Aquinas is after, I'm going to avoid all that and just say, look, lying is something that opposes truth. And you can oppose truth in a variety of ways. That's what's important. And Aquinas doesn't even list all the ways, but he's just saying, to be on your guard against lying is that to realize that lying is a sort of a multifaceted operation. It's opposing the truth in a variety of ways. Now, think of it. I can even do it. I can oppose truth by telling the truth. This is how sneaky lying can be. So say you're at an event with me, and let's say I enjoy, and I'm having a good time at the event, but for some reason I want you to think otherwise. Maybe it's, I don't know. Maybe we're at an event and you say this is awful or whatever, and maybe I like it. I might, if I were to say to you in a straight voice, this is great, this is great, you would infer from that, oh, this guy likes this event. But if I were to say the exact same thing, simplistically speaking, I'm going to state the truth, this is great. Well, most of us would pick up on that and go, what? You didn't say the same thing twice. The first time you said, this is great, I thought you, and I inferred, right? I thought you liked it. And now when you said the exact same thing verbally, but I'm thinking you're not happy here. You're not liking this. So if I were to say something that technically speaking is true, I like it, and I say this is great, I'm representing myself in a duplicitous way, or I'm opposing truth and getting you to think I don't like it. So even though I'm uttering, in a sense, a truth, you're going to make a different inference and think something contrary to what I am. So I'm dissembling, I'm lying in that particular context, but I'm lying by stating a truth. That's done a lot. You're on your guard about that. A lot of times, politicians and people will say things in a certain way where if you read the transcript, it sounds like all truths are being uttered, but if you listen to how it's delivered, the rhetoric, the way, the aesthetics behind it and all that could be quite different. Okay, so that's a kind of lying by stating the truth. Sounds counterintuitive, but it's done a lot. So Aquinas is like, look, all lying is sinful. Like, it's a vice. Vices are engaging in sinful behavior. Even if you make jokes, right? Sometimes the jokes are tricking or whatever. We rely on that. Even jokes are those are kind of sinful because they're opposed to truth. Even if you tell lies to help someone, right? We have expressions like, well, it's a harmless little lie. It's not that bad or whatever. And Aquinas would say, yeah, it's not that bad, but it's still a lie. It's still a vice. It's still opposed to truth. It's still a sin. So, well, I'm going to be in big trouble now for that? Aquinas says, no, these things are not grievous sins. Yeah, you're sinning, but it's not that big of a deal. It's not like a mortal sin. If your lie is to help someone, or if your lie is not doing a lot of damage. So there's a kind of consequentialism built into Aquinas' thought. It's not that huge of a deal. But in certain cases, if you're lying and it causes a lot of damage, and whatnot, yeah, that is a big deal. That could be a mortal sin. So you have to look at the circumstances. Okay, so we've got this sort of general notion of truth. Truth as a propensity to tell. Lying is a vice. It's sort of it's opposed to truth. Lying is a sin. Finally, question 111, dissimulation and hypocrisy. Aquinas says this. Is dissimulation always a sin? Yup, it is. It's a kind of lie, and lies are sins. So we're getting this sort of nested, unpacking a little bit more of the concepts as we go along through the questions. Again, this stuff all fits together. It's like a giant sort of accordion kind of thing. Yeah, it's a kind of lie. It's basically a way of signifying the contrary in you, like other than what you are. That's dissimulation. So yeah, it's kind of lying. And it's a lie told by signs of outward deeds. Now, is all dissimulation hypocrisy? Aquinas says no. Hypocrisy is a particular kind of dissimulation. And hypocrisy for Aquinas, and we saw this in when we were looking at passages in the Old Testament, but especially in Matthew. Really, hypocrisy is not dissimulation per se, but it's dissimulation in order to make people think the contrary in you, to think you're better than you are. Really, that's what Aquinas is zeroing in on. When a person simulates another, when the sinner simulates being the just person. If I am a sinner and I do things and say things and whatever to make you think I'm not a sinner, the contrary, not a sinner, different than a sinner, or worse, like, oh, I'm a really good guy, that's dissimulation, which is hypocrisy, right? It's not just any dissimulation, because I could dissimulate and make you think that, I liked them at an event or not. That's dissimulation as well, which is a kind of lying, but it's not hypocrisy. So hypocrisy is really the idea of, you trying to pass yourself off as better than you are. So hypocrisy is a kind of dissimulation, and you can dissimulate, again, in all kinds of ways and not be a hypocrite. Now, is hypocrisy a mortal sin? Nah, it's lying, but not all lying is grievous. Not all of it's mortal sin, right? Got to look at the circumstances. Not necessarily. It can be, but not necessarily. So as there are minor lies, and minor sins, and then, huge lies, mortal sins, that kind of stuff, there's going to be major lies and major hypocrisy. Hypocrisy is rooted ultimately, think about it, you're trying to get people to think you're better than you are. Why would you even want to do that? Why? Well, there's a sense of pride, right? Vainglory, a sense of pride that we have, right? And that's a risky thing. Remember, the father of pride is sort of the devil and all this stuff, and pride is one of the major sins, right? One of the 7 deadly sins is sometimes called the primal sin, the root sin, and so it's a bad one, and it has to be controlled. If it's not controlled, it can get you into all kinds of trouble. And if you're being hypocritical for the pleasure of enjoying that people think you're better than you are, that's not so bad, right? It's still a sin. It's not that great. But if you're getting people, let's say, to think you're better than you are in order to spread like false doctrines, get people to believe things, and then Aquinas would say, like, let's say you were a false preacher or something like that, and you get people to think you're better than you are, take what you say as true, and then believe false things about, the important stuff about religion and all that, and you jeopardize their souls. If you're doing stuff like that, then your hypocrisy, right? That's being hypocritical. That would be a mortal sin, right? If you're getting people spreading false doctrine and doing that endangering people's eternal soul, Aquinas would say you are in big trouble if you do stuff like that. That would be a mortal sin. Even though, there are some cases of, it being born of pride, it might not be that big of a deal. Once again, we see the same thing as we saw in earlier discussions. We're doing virtue ethics, and hypocrisy is within the context of virtue ethics, so circumstances are going to be important. You can't just simply state a rule and it applies everywhere. No, you got to look at what's going on, what's the individual doing, what are the surroundings, what are the circumstances in general. So, and that's very typical of virtue ethics, which is largely what Aquinas is doing here. Okay, now, as I said, Aquinas doesn't stop. The other ones go on. A couple more questions go on, where he looks at of boasting in 112 and of irony in 113. But I'll leave it off here. See you next video.